NASA knew exactly where the spacecraft was, but it no longer possessed the equipment needed to talk to it. According to NASA's own mission records, a spacecraft launched in the 1970s was still out there, still transmitting, still following the laws of physics exactly as expected. Yet the organization that built the systems around it had lost the practical ability to command it. The machine survived. The language did not. And while that contradiction sat quietly in deep space, another problem was approaching Earth. A window was closing. If nothing changed, the spacecraft would pass through a rare encounter with the Earth-Moon system and continue onward into deep space. A functioning vehicle would drift past, not because it had failed, but because humanity had forgotten how to speak to it. The signal arriving from the spacecraft was not proof of success. It was evidence of something missing. The spacecraft was called ISEE-3. Decades earlier, it had left Earth on a mission that eventually carried it far beyond its original purpose. NASA ended routine operations in the late 1990s. The spacecraft continued its journey anyway. Years passed. Ground systems changed. Hardware disappeared. Engineers retired. Technology moved on. Then, in 2014, ISEE-3 came back into the neighborhood of Earth. And that was when an uncomfortable reality became visible. The spacecraft appeared healthier than the infrastructure designed to communicate with it. NASA could track it. NASA could hear it. But the specialized hardware once used to command it no longer existed in operational form. The encounter window kept approaching. Every day the spacecraft moved closer. Every day the opportunity became smaller. The obvious assumption was that the spacecraft would be the difficult part. Instead, the difficult part was Earth. If the original communication chain had vanished, could it be rebuilt? Not by restoring old mission control rooms. Not by reinstalling decades-old equipment. By creating an entirely new bridge. The effort that emerged became known as the ISEE-3 Reboot Project. Its members were not repairing a broken spacecraft. They were attempting something stranger. They were trying to recover a lost language.
We have lock on the subcarrier.
The visual contrast was impossible to ignore.
Data looks clean.
A spacecraft designed in the 1970s was waiting in deep space.
Predicted deterioration.
On Earth,
But the
modern
latest
laptops
telemetry
sat beside
confirms full
software-defined
operational
radio
capability.
equipment, replacing systems that had once filled institutional facilities. The old transmitters were gone. The old interfaces were gone. Much of the original operational knowledge had scattered with time. What remained were documents, engineering records, surviving expertise, and a rapidly shrinking deadline. The challenge was not simply transmitting a signal. The challenge was transmitting the right signal. Every spacecraft carries assumptions about the world that built it. ISEE-3 expected commands from a communications ecosystem that no longer existed. The team had to recreate enough of that ecosystem to make the spacecraft recognize Earth again. Days disappeared. The encounter window continued shrinking. Even success created pressure. Each technical hurdle solved consumed time that could never be recovered. And there was still a larger question hanging over everything. Even if the signal reached the spacecraft, would it answer? For years, ISEE-3 had been a distant source of telemetry. A survivor. A transmitter. Something that could be observed. Observation and communication are not the same thing. Then the relationship changed. Two-way communication was restored. Signals traveled outward. Responses came back. The spacecraft was no longer merely broadcasting into the darkness. It was participating. Telemetry began returning from a machine that many assumed belonged entirely to history.
Telemetry looks stable on the X-band
Numbers appeared
downlink.
on screens.
Confirmed. The vintage
Subsystems
hardware is
reported their
holding the lock.
condition. Commands were acknowledged. The spacecraft seemed startlingly alive. The contradiction deepened. The deeper engineers looked, the less the spacecraft resembled a relic. Instead, it increasingly resembled an active vehicle waiting for instructions. The pressure did not disappear.
The pressurant levels
It
are dropping
intensified.
below the red line.
Communication had
Losing
answered
performance
one
margin
question.
faster than projected.
Another immediately replaced it.
Telemetry
Listening
looks good.
is not
We have stable
obedience.
operations confirmed.
Could the
advance cannot
spacecraft
be
still
paused at this
move?
stage.
The approaching encounter with Earth transformed that question from curiosity into necessity. Control mattered only if it could influence trajectory. The countdown narrowed. Communication. Command. Navigation. Each step depended on the one before it. Failure at any stage would leave the spacecraft drifting past its opportunity. Then came the moment that mattered most. A command sequence was prepared. The target was not symbolic. It was physical. Thrusters, metal valves, stored propellant, hardware that had remained dormant for decades. The command left Earth. Then came the wait. Across millions of miles, the signal traveled toward a spacecraft that had not fired its thrusters since the 1980s. Nothing about the passage of time guaranteed success. Machines age. Components degrade. Propulsion systems
Flight,
lose
the maneuver
pressure.
is confirmed.
Assumptions fail.
Copy that. We
The
show
signal
stable
arrived.
telemetry.
And the spacecraft responded. The thrusters fired. For the first time in 27 years, the vehicle changed state because someone on Earth had told it to. Not because it happened automatically. Not because it followed a pre-programmed sequence. Because a command had been sent. And understood. The meaning of the spacecraft changed instantly. Moments earlier, it had been a historical artifact capable of communication. Now it was an operational spacecraft under demonstrated control. The missing language had been recovered. The proof existed in the movement of hardware, in the flow of propellant, in the response of a machine that still
Operating
remembered how to
quietly
listen.
in deep space.
Yet the countdown remained.
Emphasizes endurance
The restored
rather than
capability had
races.
arrived inside a
From
world
the
where time had
historical data
already
of
been
IC3
lost.
to the voids where
The
information
larger
was
objective
lost.
involved
This
using the
archive charts
spacecraft's
the
remaining
difficult path
propulsion to place it into a desired trajectory. Control had been recovered. Opportunity was another matter. Engineers soon encountered a new constraint. Pressure inside the propulsion system was lower than hoped. Evidence pointed toward depletion of the nitrogen needed to push fuel through the system. Commands worked. The spacecraft obeyed. But obedience could not manufacture resources that were no longer there. The encounter window continued closing. The trajectory could not be shaped as intended. Some possibilities had already disappeared. No amount of recovered capability could fully restore them. That is what makes this story difficult to place inside a simple victory narrative. The communication problem was solved. Control was proven. The larger orbital objective remained out of reach. Success arrived, but it arrived late. And late success still has consequences. Eventually, ISEE-3 continued past Earth. The spacecraft moved onward. The rare encounter that had driven the countdown slipped into the past. One opportunity was gone forever. Yet something important had changed. The spacecraft was not the thing that had been rescued. The spacecraft had survived all along. What disappeared was humanity's side of the relationship. The antennas changed. The hardware vanished. The institutional memory eroded. The language was forgotten. The achievement of the reboot project was not bringing a dead machine back to life. It was proving that a lost capability could be rebuilt before the final evidence disappeared. In the end, the most powerful image is not the spacecraft. It is a modern laptop speaking to a machine designed for a communications world that no longer exists. At the beginning of this story, the signal from deep space looked like proof that the spacecraft had survived. By the end, it means something different. It is proof that technology can outlive the systems built to support it. Proof that capability can vanish before the machine does. And proof that, for a brief moment in 2014, humanity recovered the ability to speak a forgotten language before the listener drifted away.